Have you ever said yes to something before you even had a chance to check in with yourself? And then you spent the rest of the day quietly wishing you hadn't. Maybe it's a summer barbecue. Maybe it's a plan you agreed to, out of habit. Maybe it's that familiar moment where saying no feels harder than saying yes. And then later in the day, the guilt shows up. Not because you did something wrong, but because you're not sure how to choose yourself without feeling like you've let someone down. If this sounds familiar, this conversation is for you. Today, we're talking about people pleasing, guilt, and what it really means to begin choosing yourself again. Come on in, it's time to choose happy. Wherever you are, whatever kind of day you're having, this is your reminder. You have a choice. If you're ready to break free from self-doubt and negative thinking, you're in the right place. Hi, I'm Marie, and this is the Choose Happy with Marie podcast. Welcome. Hello, how are you? I hope you're doing well and having a wonderful summer so far if you are listening to it when this episode goes live. I want to start with something really simple. The classic summer barbecue. You get the invitation earlier in the week, and at first, you notice your immediate reaction. You don't really want to go, not because anything is wrong with it, not because you don't care about the people. You're just tired. You want a quiet evening. Maybe you want to stay home, sit outside, or do nothing at all. But almost immediately, another feeling shows up, and it's called guilt. That familiar thought, I should go. I don't want to hurt their feelings. So you pause, for a microsecond. You think about it. You weigh it on your mind, and before you even realize it, you are saying yes. Not because you checked in with yourself, but because it felt easier than the discomfort of saying no. And later, maybe on the drive there, or even after you've arrived, there's a part of you wondering, why did I say yes when I didn't really want to? This is where I want to begin today, and I used a summer barbecue as an example, but it can be any example. Because I don't think people pleasing is about saying yes too often. I think it's about losing touch with the moment where you could have checked in with yourself, but didn't feel fully safe to do that. We often think people pleasing is about being overly nice or too accommodating, but it is accommodating at times, or not having strong enough boundaries. And yes, I do think there is some truth to that. But I also think that people pleasing is what happens when we are connected more to others, how that is more important than us staying connected to ourselves. I don't want you to see it as a personality flaw. It's actually a strategy. And it's a very human one, actually. At some point, you and we learned that it's easier to get along, that keeping things smooth mattered more, that other people's comfort mattered more. And slowly, without even noticing it, we've become so good at tracking everyone else's needs, their reactions, their expectations, maybe even their emotions. You and we learned to read the room, to adjust, to anticipate, to soften our own preferences so things would stay okay. And in doing that, something very subtle has happened. You and we stopped asking ourselves what we actually wanted in the moment, not because you don't have wants, but because the habit of checking in with yourself got replaced by the habit of checking out. So now, even simple decisions like a barbecue invitation can feel surprisingly complicated because the real question isn't, do I want to go? It's actually, will I be okay if someone is disappointed in me? There are a few moments where people pleasing tends to show up in everyday decisions. For example, the first is the moment when you say yes immediately, before you've even had time to check in with yourself. Because silence can feel uncomfortable, and saying yes feels easier than sitting in that uncertainty. Another moment is when we start consulting everyone else before you've consulted yourself. And what does that look like? I'll give you examples. You ask what they think you should do, what they would do, what makes most sense. And you're asking not because you're incapable of deciding, but because you've lost the habit of trusting your own internal response first. And the third way that it can show up is what happens after. The guilt. So even when you try to choose yourself, even when you want to say no, and even when nothing's actually wrong, there's still a lingering feeling like you've done something unkind. But I want to gently offer this reframe. That guilt doesn't always mean that you've made the wrong choice. Sometimes it just means you're doing something unfamiliar. You're choosing yourself in a space where you're used to choosing others. And that feels new. It can feel unsteady. It can feel uncomfortable. So what do you do in those moments? Well, you don't have to do anything big or a perfect script. But what about this? Before you answer anything this week, so before you say yes or no, or maybe, pause and ask yourself, what do I actually want here? Not what's going to keep everything smooth, not what's going to avoid disappointment, just what is true for me right now. And then give yourself a moment to hear what that is. And even if you don't act on it perfectly, you may still say yes sometimes when you mean no. This isn't about getting it right. It's actually about rebuilding the relationship with your own voice to be able to hear it. And you do that one small moment at a time. Every time you ask yourself a question and you take the time to listen to yourself. That's how it gets built. I want to leave you with a simple thought. You don't need to become someone who never says yes when she means no. That's not what I'm suggesting. And you don't need to get rid of guilt completely before you start choosing yourself. That's not how this works. If anything, guilt often shows up right at the beginning, when you're starting to do something differently in your life. When you pause instead of reacting. When you check in with yourself instead of automatically saying yes. When you begin to matter in your own decision-making process again. So if you notice guilt, it's not suggesting that you're doing this wrong. It just means you're starting to do something new. Something that is asking you to stay with yourself a little longer than you're used to. And I think that's what people pleasing has often taken from us. Not just our ability to say no, but our ability to stay present with ourselves long enough to hear what we actually want. So this week, you don't have to change everything. You don't have to set every boundary perfectly. Just notice the moment before you respond and ask yourself gently, what do I actually want here? Even if you still say yes sometimes, or even if it feels uncomfortable, that moment of noticing is the beginning of trusting yourself again. So if this conversation resonated with you, you're welcome to join my Choose Happy emails. Every Wednesday, I send a short note with an affirmation, journal prompts, and a reflection just to help you slow down and reconnect with yourself in the middle of the week. It's just a small space that I offer to our community to help come back to your own voice, maybe when everything is feeling a little loud that week. You can join us at choosehappywithmarie.com, and there's a sign-up area there. There's also a link in the show notes. And if you know someone who tends to overthink their decisions or struggle with people-pleasing, feel free to share this episode with her. Sometimes just hearing "me too" is where change starts happening. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I hope you have a wonderful day. And until next time, remember, you don't have to disappear from your own life in order to be kind to others. You are allowed to be part of it too. Wishing you a wonderful week. Cheers. Thanks for listening to Choose Happy with Marie. If today's episode spoke to you, I would love it if you could share it with a friend or leave a quick review for the show. It helps more women find this kind of support. Remember, you don't have to overhaul your life to start feeling better. You just have to choose happy right where you are, one choose happy choice at a time. I'll see you next time. Take care.